Good Yontif. So, good Shabbos, good Yontif, all of the things. The Chazan and I have been talking about how are we going to get more people here on Friday nights, because Friday night is like a great service, and it turns out just make it Yom Kippur, and everybody comes. This happens roughly every 4 years, that Yom Kippur, which is already known as Shabbat Shabbaton, the Shabbat of Shabbats, that it hosts, or Shabbat hosts it. And it's fitting that these are called both Shabbat and Shabbat Shabbaton because Yom Kippur and Shabbat have a lot in common in many ways. On Yom Kippur, we withdraw from the world. No food, no makeup, no pleasures of the body, just prayer, just being here. Shabbat, too, is a bit about our withdrawal from the secular world. And like any moment of taking a step back, be it yearly or weekly occurrence, we are meant to evaluate what kind of world we are stepping back from and into. Is that better? Can you hear me okay? Okay. It's likely the reason that Rabbi Heschel opens a chapter in his prophetic masterpiece, The Sabbath, with this story. It's from the Talmud, and there were once 3 rabbis sitting and talking. Rabbi Yehuda looks around and says, "How awesome," my translation, "are the Romans? They have built markets, they've built bathhouses and bridges." Rabbi Yossi was silent. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai answered, everything they built for themselves. They build markets to sell human beings, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect tolls. A Jew sitting nearby went and relayed the words to the government. They decreed, "Yehuda, who extolled us, let him be extolled," and he was given a government job. Yossi, who was silent, let him be exiled, and Shimon, who disparaged us, let him be killed. We'll check in on Shimon in just a few minutes. But this story was one of the very first Talmudic stories that I ever learned. I read it in Rabbi Heschel's book, and ostensibly Heschel is writing his poetic version of why we should all observe Shabbat. He wants to introduce his reader to the glory of the palace in time that Shabbat is. He seems to think that Shabbat is a practice which will bring us to amazement and appreciation of the world around us. We will stop living under the tyranny of space. We will stop doing all the things that we do that hurt one another and the world if we simply rest in the holiness and praise of time. For Heschel, Shabbat is more than just rest. It's an antidote to the modern world. Now, Judaism has always had a complicated relationship with the secular culture around us. We're not sure if what they have to offer is good, bad, or neutral. Since the Enlightenment and the opening of the doors to Jews to participate in secular life, these questions have become more important and more prominent. There are some influences from the outside world that we readily embrace. Participation, gender equality, all of these come to mind. Also, the influence of the non-Jewish world on our food. Without the secular world, we would not know the wonder that is pretzel challah. And yet, there are still parts of the world that we're holding out against. One could imagine the Talmud story retold as Rabbi Witkovsky began. "What a wonderful age we live in. I can order food to my house with the push of a button. I can work from home if I want to, and in one flight, my family can go on vacation anywhere in the world." Cantor Rosner was silent. That wasn't supposed to be the joke. Rabbi Schwartzman says, "You order food to your house because you don't have time to cook. You can work from home, which means you have to work all the time. And you only go on vacation to post things on Instagram, and you spend half the time texting me about work." There is much in our world today that we might want protection from, like the Romans of old. things that Shabbat and the practice of rest can safeguard against. The litany is long and familiar. Screens, burnout, work-life balance, sustainability, misinformation, disinformation. It is long and worn and run through the pages of newspapers, magazines, books, and of course, screens. One need only look at the list of new things that the Surgeon General of the United States is warning us about. There are warnings issued just this year on workplace health. A warning was issued about a loneliness epidemic, a general warning about the state of mental health in America, and a specific warning about social media and its negative effects on us all, especially our children. And, this is my favorite, a Surgeon General warning on parenting and how it hurts parents. I actually like the idea of babies having a little warning label on the diaper as they, okay. Everyone that I know is tired. Everyone is burnt. Everyone needs some wholeness, some shleimut. Shabbat, with its message of rest, of slowing down, of appreciating the people and the world around us, can still serve as an antidote to these ills. And Shabbat isn't only about finding ways to protect us from the outside world, it's also here to protect the world from us. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch asks, what was there to safeguard the world against human beings? The answer is Shabbat, because it checks a human's will to master the world. On Yom Kippur, we think about all the ways that we've negatively affected the people and the world around us. Shabbat, too, forces us to stop changing that world. The whole point of the day is to stop creating, stop molding, stop doing, stop working, and just let the world go along in its natural course. One of the things that rituals are meant to do is remind us of power that we have. The rituals of Shabbat remind us not of our power to do something, but our power to cease and to rest. In a world ravaged by the effects of human power on everything, I can think of really not a more important message than that we should exercise our power to give ourselves and the world a little break. Now, I was talking with Pastor Harrelson from Overbrook Church about our sermons this year and talking to him about Shabbat. And one of the things that he said is that in his eyes, the Sabbath is, in his words, a diagnostic tool, a way of seeing the world around us for what it is. It's not just a tool for us, but also the world. Observing the Sabbath allows us to look around and see who is left out. In his words, if the world that you are living in requires people to work 7 days a week without stopping, there is a moral rot in the heart of that society. He's not wrong. Our American society used to value Sabbath for everyone. That's why I can't buy beer on Sunday. And it used to be structured such that more people could have a Sabbath rest. It's something that we've lost in our tumble through to postmodernity, and something that we've lost at our peril. And I have to say, as high-minded as that sounds, for me, coming to Shabbat was much simpler and much more personal. As I think I've said before, I didn't grow up particularly observant or knowledgeable, and as I've said before, my mom hates when I say that. I came to Judaism through its writings and its practice, both out of a desire to explore my heritage, but also as a way to try and make meaning in my already lovely regular life. The more that I learned, the more it really did work. I love being a part of a people and a project that was ancient and working towards a better goal. And as I learned and took on more mitzvot, the hardest one for me to add, the biggest mountain to climb, was Shabbos. Keeping kosher is just, eating this and not eating that. Prayer was adding words to my day or forgetting to add those words and then feeling bad about it. But Shabbat was a fundamental shift. I had to say no to things, to miss out on plans and events. I had to prepare so much during the week to make sure that I would have the setup and the space to do Shabbat right. On Shabbat itself, it was hard at first to observe, to see past all of the strictures. Every time I learned a new rule, it felt like a burden. I remember that as I was starting to take on Shabbat practice, every Friday I would sort of ask myself with a sigh, all right, am I doing it this week or am I taking this week off? Meaning a week off from Shabbat. But slowly and surely, it got easier. And I found not only did I like it, but I came to rely on it. I could get through busy weeks because I knew that I would get my 25 hours of rest at the end. I knew when to plan the car trips and when to plan the quiet walks, the reading time or the wandering through an art museum. My Friday question became less a question and more one of joyful anticipation of the sleep, the rest, and the fun that I would get to have. Shabbat was a time that I hung out with my Jewish friends, the non-athletes that I rarely saw any other day. I still mostly hung around with the non-Shabbat observers, but all of the members of the Frisbee team learned the rules and helped me observe them. One of them even went to our Hillel Rabbi to check and see if I was lying or not when I said I couldn't clean up after a party because you can't use a sponge on Shabbat. Shabbat became something that protected me, not only from party cleanup, but from everything stressful in the world. I remember at the end of the year that I became Shabbat observant, I wanted to test my Shabbat powers and see if they really worked. Like a Jedi completing his training, I put on my Shabbat clothes and I walked into the most stressful place I could think of, the library on the Shabbat of Finals Week. Now, I remember walking in and holding Shabbat around me like a suit of armor as I walked from desk to desk, greeting friends, trying to bring them a little calm, a little peace, a little of the Shabbat rest that I found. This is also when I should have realized that I was going to be a rabbi. I remember leaving the library and that I felt no stress. None of it had broken through my armor of Shabbat. And I knew that my transformation was complete. I was now a Shabbos Jew. And then I went home for summer. Summer Shabbats are hard. They're hard enough because they're so long, but I wasn't ready for the loneliness and the boredom that would hit me every week. Loneliness in small doses can be a good way to recharge. So can boredom. Usually, one of the things that I would love about Shabbat was being a little bit bored and then finding random and interesting things to alleviate that boredom. But being home all day with no one around, it was rough. And by midsummer, I was back to the, maybe I'm going to take this one off so that I could do all the things that I wanted to do. All until one Shabbat in August, when after coming home from synagogue and having no one around and being so bored I was going crazy, I thought to myself, I'm just going to play Xbox. What's the big deal? And as I turned on the TV, it started to hail. In August, in Wisconsin. And when I turned off the TV, the hail stopped. I realized two things in that moment. One, God does not mess around. And two, I was doing Shabbat wrong. I thought Shabbat was this personal aura of protection for me, and it can be that. But what I forgot about was the things that made Shabbat so fun at school, where most of the time my friends, even the ones who didn't observe, it can't be just about me. It had to be also about a community. In her new book, The Sabbath World, Judith Shulevitz writes about a history of the idea of Shabbat and what it can and should mean for us today. One of the things that she said is that the fundamental message of her book is that there's no way you can get to the right kind of rest by yourself. She talks about how Shabbat's bargain only works if we all do it. If one of the stores stay open on Shabbat, then they all have to stay open. It's kind of a communal non-compete. She talks about how Shabbat is necessary for social cohesion. The resting, the eating, the learning, the Shabbat walks, all of it brings people together. Our community is already one that comes together on Shabbat. We have a beautiful, beautiful group of people who's here. We have a delicious kiddush that we all sit and eat together. Let us this year re-up on Shabbat and Shabbat observance. Shabbat entails for us rest, but different kinds of rest. It can be a rest from labor. It can also be a rest from decision making. You know what you're going to do. You're going to go to shul. You're going to have a nice bagel. You're going to see your friends. It's going to be a great time. It can be a rest from needing to be in contact with the office or with the outside world. And it can be a rest from that outside world and the onslaught of news and information that is beeping at us constantly. Shabbat can be a rest from our screens and the technology that is beneficial, thank heaven, but all pervasive and all changing. Shabbat is a time for us to rest from making changes around us. It's a time that we can sit back and just be and not have to worry about what the next thing that we're going to do is. Shabbat is a time to sing. Singing, friends, singing, making harmony, making music together is incredibly important. There's a study about 15 years ago at this point where they gave 20 groups tasks to do. 10 groups, they made them sing like a little rhyme or a song or something beforehand, and 10 groups didn't sing. And all 10 of the groups that sang before they did whatever the group task was outperformed the 10 that didn't. Singing together brings people together in very, very real and wonderful ways. Now, this year, we're going to focus on the singing that we do in this room. We're going to focus on the singing that we do in that room, the chapel over there. We are bringing in 3 famous Jewish musicians to help us in that effort this year over 3 different Shabbatot. We're excited to have that. And we have our own famous Jewish musician here every single week. He's in residence, all right? Cantor Rosner leading us in amazing tunes, some new, some old, some 800 years old that we're going to do. But Shabbat, friends, needs to be a time when you sing. If it's here, if it's at home, if it's as you walk, if it's in the shower, find a time and a way to sing this year. And Shabbat is about our community. The Surgeon General is not wrong when he writes about the loneliness epidemic. Shabbat is a time to invite people to our homes, to see each other here. There's something incredible, actually, about the fact that so many people come to the shul on Shabbat, because it means that you know where to find your community. You don't have to make plans. You just have to come here, and you are going to see someone who will say hello, who will ask you how you are, who you can hang out with. And that is incredible. It exists very, very few other places in our world. So please come here. But also, invite each other over. Have a Shabbat dinner, have a Shabbat lunch, have a Shabbat evening, whatever it is. Invite people to your house for a meal, for a song. It will create, as Shulvit says, the social cohesion that we are going to need in the year ahead. Now, that story from the Talmud that we began with, has a dramatic end. Shimon Bar Yochai's tale gets a little bit rough for him. The Romans chase him. They're trying to kill him. He and his son hide in a cave for 13 years. We're told that they were sustained by a river in the cave and a magical carob tree that grew in front of the entrance to protect them. There they did nothing but study every day for all 13 years until they finally came out to see what was happening in the world. They saw people planting and harvesting, and they were enraged. How can these people turn aside from the pursuit of the Holy Torah and work on these menial things? Shimon Bar Yochai, we're told, everywhere that he looked, burst into flames until God yelled at him and said, "Why have you come out of the cave only to destroy my world?" and sent both of them back in for another year. In this part of the story, we see the dichotomy laid out plainly. Shimon, so wrapped in the holy that he cannot abide the regular. God does not want this. We're not all supposed to quit our jobs and move into caves in the mountains. We are not meant to be monks. It cannot be Shabbat all the time. The Jewish task is not to avoid the secular, but to elevate it. And the answer to that is Shabbat. When Shimon and his son come out of the cave a second time, they're prepared to be the only people on earth who are concerned with spirituality and holiness. They see a man running with 2 bundles of myrtle. "Why are you hurrying?" they said. He replies, "Because it's almost Shabbat." They ask, "But why do you need 2?" The man responded, "One is for Shamor, and the other is for Zachor," citing the 2 biblical obligations on Shabbat, that we Zachor, that we remember, and that we Shamor, that we guard. And at this, Shimon and his son were overjoyed. Let this be a year of Shamor and Zachor for us and for Shabbat. May we Shomer Shabbat, make it a palace in time, that it is different and special, that protects us from screens and stress of the outside world and protects the outside world from us. May it also be a year of Zachor, of remembering who we are and who we want to be as a community that comes together to pray and sing and eat, that invites each other over for meals and remembers not to leave anyone out. Achad Ha'am said, more than that Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. In the year ahead, may we keep Shabbat. May we make it holy and special. May we share it with others. May it keep us safe, sane, and strong. Amen.